Good afternoon and welcome to the Varside Spurs podcast. Today, once again, I'm joined by the faithful and loyal Ritch. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm all right, mate. I'm still here. How about you?
Yeah, just about. Yeah, which is unlike a certain Antonio Conte, who still is not here. We'll get into him very,
No.
very shortly. I think we'll probably spend the lion's share of this short pod on the gaffer.
Yeah, if that's what he still is.
Yeah, exactly that. So I just thought we'd just briefly touch on. No, I don't think we'd do too much because every single pod has done like an hour or special on Harry Kane, but we haven't mentioned it since. So I just thought we'll have a quick take on that milestone. Just personally, my son and I were there. It felt such a huge moment. I mean, I remember hugging him and just saying, this may not feel as significant as it actually is, but in years to come, we will be able to say, and you'll be able to say to your kids, we were there. Because
Yeah.
this record is not going to be broken for a long, long, long time, if ever, really, to be honest. And we were
Well,
there.
well, this is it. I mean, we don't know how much further past it he's going to go yet. I mean,
Mm.
if we manage to keep him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did sign a new deal now. I mean, I think we don't need to go over it again because we've spoken a lot before about where is it he could go. And that's not to say that there isn't a lot of clubs that would be clamouring to get his signature, but whether or not any of those clubs would be prepared to pay what the club would ask for him at this point is another matter. And at nearly 30 years old, perhaps other sides will now be looking to bring in another younger marquee centre forward if they're looking to spend that sort of money. So, I mean, he could easily go a long way past it. It reminded me, strangely enough, like you just said to your son. I remember we went to the '91 Cup final, and my uncle took me. My uncle Jeremy, God rest his soul, was a lifelong Chelsea fan, but he used to take me to a lot of Spurs games, and he managed to get us cup final tickets. And before that game kicked off, because of course we all knew that Gascoigne was off, really, he said to me, cherish watching Paul Gascoigne today because you will never see a player like him again.
No,
I
no.
think, although we've seen a lot of amazing players since then, he was right. And I do sort of look back, even though that day itself wasn't a particularly good day for Paul, you think, yeah, those moments do get etched in your memory because they are once in a lifetime players, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gascoigne was a generational talent. I mean, it was a little clip going around recently. Did you see the one where he sort of did that kind of Rabona type penalty?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
fantastic. I mean, that sort of player, I mean, what could he have become, if
I
he hadn't had
know,
that injury? Unbelievable.
I know.
But we've been
Yeah,
lucky, we've been blessed, haven't we, at Spurs with those sort of talents. And you probably have to put Kane right up there with them because
certainly.
that achievement is despite the mocking, no trophies, etc., it is just exceptional. Lest we forget, Shearer
Yeah,
only got one trophy, and his career
yeah,
is not over yet.
yeah, exactly that.
And
I
Kane,
mean, you say about putting Kane up there with them. I think I would go now and say I would put him above all of those players, simply because of the completeness of him. I mean,
mm,
Gavin's an amazingly talented footballer, but I mean, granted, he played, a lot of his time for us carrying lots of injuries, and you read back on certainly that cup final that year, he had, double hernia surgery in the middle of the season and basically was playing anaesthetized for all of
mm,
that,
mm-hmm.
you know. And so, we have to sort of look at it through that context. But, Harry Kane is a cut above all of them, I
Mm.
mean, um,
I mean, he's
I
achieved.
I used to think Teddy Sheringham was the most talented sort of striker that I'd ever see at Spurs, and I think Harry Kane has got so much more to his game in a
Yeah,
similar
yeah.
way that Sheringham has, in that he develops his game as he ages and as his body changes. But
Yeah.
what?
I mean, he's got that record, and he's probably our best striker, best midfielder, and best defender.
Mm,
And he's
yeah,
even had a
yeah,
going goal.
Yeah, he's even had a goal. Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, he might get called upon again.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we do need to address this thorny issue of Antonio Conte. I think we'll start off just sort of with your feelings about him as a manager, and then what you feel his mood is and his ambitions still are for his position. What do you feel about him and whether he still has any ambitions for the club?
I have very mixed feelings about it. I mean, I'm I'm prepared to be all on board with him, and I'm prepared to take the long view that we are in the middle of a rebuild, and the crap football we're watching is a consequence of the fact that that is the case. In uh, everybody's sort of doing this comparison between us and Woolwich and saying, "Oh God, look how lovely football they're playing down the road," and isn't it terrible that we're having to sit through this shit every week? But it forgets the fact that they've had to sit through shit for 4 years to get to this stage.
Absolutely.
And we did have this sort of long in the tooth, exhausted side that was really flogged to death a couple of years ago. That then Mourinho did everything in his power to demotivate and turn into a dysfunctional unit, and all of the stuff that's gone on since, and having to shift all of these players that didn't perform, the Lo Celsos and Ndombele's and all these really bad influences around the club. I don't think we can look at the performances in isolation from any of that, and as a result, I think we have got to say, with a long view, you've got to be able to give Conte a bit of leeway. That said, although I don't like to sort of join in the social media, stroke media, hand wringing, pearl clutching thing, it is very difficult to see that he actually sees him further than this summer.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And
I'd probably
perhaps
echo
that's being reflected with performances on the pitch.
Yeah, I'd probably echo that, Rich. I've always kind of said really that I want to give him the chance, and as rocky as it got, it's like you were saying about Arteta. They probably tried to sack him 2 or 3 times. The fans, and now he's obviously the savior. But at the moment, he is. I think this is the sort of frustration. He's wedded to a system that just doesn't suit what we've got, but he's so determined to stick to it, which means we're seeing a lot of awful football. You couple that with everything that's happening in his personal life, and he cuts a very sort of disconsolate figure, which no wonder, if you'd have had big operation like that, plus you've lost members of your close friends, then it affects people in various different ways. He seems to think he's come back too early, but so we don't really know. None of us actually know how committed he is to the club. I mean, his message yesterday seemed to suggest that he's fully focused on us, and he tried to return too early, and he's very committed, and his final message was "Come on, you Spurs." And so that seems to be unequivocal. But we can't seem to dampen down this drip effect of this feeling that it's inevitable that he will soon go soon rather than later. It's that Poch is just waiting. That at the very most he's gone in the summer, but he'll be just a year and a half into a project that actually is still only about halfway through rebuilding. So I mean, where's the long-term strategy in the club if they do get rid of him? Because we're only halfway through what he probably should have known or would have known at the beginning of the outset. This is the journey. It's going to be very difficult at one point. I mean, in one of his press conferences not too long back, he even said, didn't he? I knew this moment was coming. So it's very hard, really, to really read the tea leaves on this, because we're all second guessing the whole thing. And just assuming that it's all about to turn to shit, and the club just needs to get him gone and get Pochettino back in for a quick lift. And like you and I have said before, we both love Pochettino. I wouldn't be unhappy with that, but I don't think it's the right situation. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like a weather vane at the moment, just swinging between yes, we should do it, get rid, or no, we should stick and we can, stick with him. And because it's hard to really know how much he wants it. And I think that's the minimum we could expect as fans is to see, because we invest so much in it. We want to see our manager, our club, our players also reciprocate in that kind of arrangement between us all. It is symbiotic, and we need to feel that they're as much invested in this project as we are, because if they're not, how can we? And then it just becomes a very destabilized situation and fan base. And that's where I think it feels at the moment. Everything is really destabilized. It's not, it doesn't feel good. There's so many rumors swirling.
Yeah, I mean, this is the big issue, isn't it? We all want clarity one way or another. And I keep thinking back to the fact that he wanted a year out when he left his last job, and I think that was ultimately why we got Nuno in, was because that was ultimately a placeholder for this. I mean, I don't have any evidence for this, but reading between the lines is that Conte was always their target, and perhaps he'd said, "Look, I need a break, but I'll come to you after my break." And we got Nuno in on a short-term deal to provide some sort of coaching and leadership for the club in the meantime. And that all went wrong quite quickly, which necessitated him coming back earlier from his stated aim for having that break. And I wonder if a lot of what's happening now is a consequence of that, was that actually he wanted probably a lot of stuff to have happened before he got there, i.e. moving some players out and doing part of the early rebuild, identifying targets. If we think about him and Paratici working in concert, then Paratici comes in before Conte and starts clearing the decks. And actually, he's been there for a bit that maybe he didn't want to be there for. And maybe this is part of the destabilizing, is that, maybe he wanted to come in when all of this work was well underway. And actually, he didn't want to work with a lot of these players. And so, I think that might play into it a little bit. And, and over and above that, like you say, this idea that although I don't necessarily buy into this narrative that says, he thinks he's doing us a favour, there is mixed messaging coming out of it, and he doesn't look like he wants to be there. His demeanour is bad. Like you say, he's grieving for close friends and relatives, and his health has been bad. And so, that all, I mean, I've not been very well the last few months, and I look like a wet weekend most of the time. So I can imagine it's got to be the same. And I just wonder whether or not the kindest thing to do would be to shoot him. I mean, to let him go and to let him have his fucking year off, and actually say, look, it might have been the thing that would have worked, but the stars couldn't align at the time they needed to align, and therefore it's not going to work as a project. And maybe they're all slowly sort of realizing this one by one. And I note that Pochettino seems to be far more prominently in the area.
Yeah. I mean, how much of this was, it's difficult. This is where it's so bloody difficult, Rich. Did the club foresee this? Did they know that they were going to have to stick through a rocky period with him? Did they bring him in, and he knows the full situation, and basically that they're going to back him. He knows that, and they're just trying to get all their ducks in a row and about contracts, etc. We just have no idea. Or was it always a temporary situation where he would come in for this very short period? At the end of it, if Pochettino was still available, that's the man we were going for, because we tried to dip our toes into that water around the Nuno period when we were really struggling to find a manager, and he was with PSG.
So the question is, was it ever this like you say, temporary, almost a stopgap? I mean, we did hear that they went in for Pochettino when he was still at PSG. I mean, the reports at the time said that PSG weren't willing to listen to us.
They extended his contract by an extra year, didn't they?
Yeah.
Try and fend us off because they wanted Compo.
Yeah, and so but you sort of look at the arc of what was happening at PSG at the time. It wasn't all roses in that garden. So whether or not that was a purely financial thing, or whether or not they actually did want to keep him at that point, I don't know. But I mean, there are an awful lot of stories about the dressing room not being with him and not buying into him, and probably not wanting to do this famous hard work that he wants to do. So, I mean,
I don't think you can read too much into that at the moment. They're all over the place as well, haven't they? They've been on a bad run just recently, PSG,
yeah,
considering they've got
yeah.
every single, FIFA game player on earth in their team.
Yeah. Well, it's a monumentally dysfunctional club, isn't it? But yeah, so I mean, I think the thing is that Levy has always spoken about, or whenever he's spoken about it, which is obviously infrequent with him, about Pochettino having to go. He said it was like a very painful divorce, and he didn't want it to happen, but it felt necessary at the time. And Pochettino has retained this affection for the club, and he speaks openly about his love for Tottenham. And there is quite clear. I would say, from my perspective, it looks like there is quite a clear understanding of unfinished business from them.
Yeah.
And he is a manager that fits our profile better in the respect that he doesn't expect us to go and fuck 200 million quid across the bank accounts at every window, whereas Conte has got a profile of somebody that wants the player he wants. So
it was interesting yesterday. I mean, there's a few sources that have said similar, but Simon Jordan, who proclaims to have some inside track, says that the club will not sell at any price. They still got a lot of stuff to do. Now, a lot of speculation is that that's all around kind of the infrastructure they want to build, hotels and casinos, whatever it is, and all sorts of other stuff that then becomes this almost like Tottenham world, which will then be really self-financing and put us in a really good position. But that's another 5 to 7 years yet. If that is the case, and like Levy was saying the other day, that we cannot compete with these financially doped clubs, surely the manager that he wants is someone like Pochettino, because he'll get us probably around the competing around the top 4 places, which for that period I suppose that would be ideal. Keeps a club with a high profile, keeps us earning good revenue, keeps our status high, whilst they build this empire, which ultimately they will then sell on.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange, isn't it? I mean, there's a little bit of shifting baseline syndrome about that. I mean, I always thought that, where we are now was supposed to be the point at which we were financially sustainable and self-financing and all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we do appear to be making a huge amount of money from match day income, plus all of these other events that get people so angry for whatever reason. It makes people cross that we have concerts at the football stadium. I'm always reminded, I mean, we had boxing matches back at Spurs in the 1980s. Everybody seems to immediately forget all that, don't they?
Well, they have them at other stadium. Other stadia, don't they? Like West Ham, Man City, Manchester United. All those stadia have concerts on them. So it's not just him being greedy and trousering the money, which clearly is not true anyway.
No, well, exactly that. I mean, but like you say, I mean, at what point are we actually going to achieve that financial position that we're going to achieve? I mean, I would wonder whether or not building a fucking cinema and a hotel is going to be it. But there you are.
Yeah. I mean, we clearly do have the money. I mean, the financial statement just recently came out shows us very healthily placed. Okay, yes, we're carrying the debt of the stadium, but it's financed over something like 20 years at like a serviceable amount of like 20 million a year. I mean, some of our sponsorships cover that. No problem at all. So that should not affect us at all. We've got some of the best profits made in the whole Premier League, and the Premier League is one of the richest in the world. We're one of the top 5 richest clubs in the world. So there's no way is it really that he doesn't want to, or that we can't. And I'm suspect that he prides himself on this incredible business model, which you have to give him kudos for, because we are in the top 5 clubs in the world for that reason. We could have
Mm.
easily been a Leeds United or a Sheffield Wednesday and been bobbing around up and down the leagues and not doing so well. We are a powerhouse of a club, but all of this, as we've said many a time before, it's repeating ourselves, and other people have said this again. Should it has been for what you're just suggesting to put us in a level where we can pay for these players, where we should be in the conversation for this top talent, because we're the stakeholders. I know
Mm.
they own the club, but we own it really.
Mm.
We the fans. They're nothing without us, and what we want, what after what they've done to our club, is to be successful,
Mm.
or at least in the conversation, because
Mm.
we do pay amongst the highest prices in the world for our season
It is.
tickets and our merchandise and etc. We have got one of the best facilities, and that's down to Daniel Levy. I get that, but that is then the starting point for us to be this club that we should be. Now, I do, coming back to Conte. I do feel that he, given all those tools, if we can, if we do them, and he wants to stick around, and we invest, he will make a success of it. I don't doubt that. I think he really is a world-class manager, but he is very wedded to a system that we have to get him the players for.
Mm.
But this is the thing: our feelings, our emotions are mixed up in the thought that maybe he is too good for us. Maybe he won't stick around because we aren't giving the players that he wants immediately. And Conte's a win now manager, and Conte wants it now. And if he doesn't get it now, he's going. And then what we're going to do? Just take a step back all the time. It's because we're penny pinching. There's all these things that we're surmising and supposing. We don't really know.
Mm.
And but that said, I'll ask you a question in a second. Looking at all these rumors online, so-called, someone's brother is a cleaner at the stadium, and said they've been told to clean out his office and all this kind of stuff, right? Everyone seems to think they know he's gone. Do you think he should go, Rich?
If he's well, the answer to that is twofold. I don't necessarily think that Conte should not be our manager, right? So I would be happy for him not to go. However, I did read yesterday that it's April, that it's looking like he might be, he might not be sort of fit to work properly until Easter. At which point, where the fuck are we going to be?
Mm.
He can't do that until then. Should he be in the job? And that's
Well,
the thing.
well, I mean, I again, we don't really truly know his health situation, how badly it's affected him, but I do know because of comparable situations where someone's had comparable operations,
Mm.
and they're basically back to manual jobs within 2 weeks.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if that's the case, and we're talking 8 weeks, this feels like a contrived ending that
Mm.
maybe that the club is trying to orchestrate, if you see what I mean. So it fits
Yeah,
us and fits
yeah.
him, and everyone saves face.
Yeah, well, I mean, without wishing to sort of veer into conspiracy theory territory, it does have that about it. And if we go back to the point I was making earlier about him wanting to have had a year away from work before he joined the club and not getting it, perhaps this is this confluence of events. The guy, he might just think, Jesus, I want some time off, and I'm here at this fucking football club, and nobody's bloody happy, and I'm not well, and people are dying and people are getting ill, and the fans are booing us all the time, and like, oh God, and I can see all these other clubs around us spending all this money, and we're just running to stand still, and I really could do with that time off now. And
Mm.
maybe the case, that's how they'll do it. They'll say, look, the guy needs to have a long period of convalescence. We're gonna pay his contract up to the summer and wish him well, and look, we've got our manager back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, my opinion is, I rather than should he go, I hope he doesn't. I hope
Mm.
he recovers quickly, gets back, and we see the old Conte smiling and laughing and going crackers on the touchline, and
Mm.
we get our mojo back, and he gets his mojo back, and then it all looks different. This is the thing, isn't it, with football? One week it's it's kind of bipolar in many ways. One week it's absolutely the worst thing ever. And the
Mm,
next week is we're going to win the lot.
mm,
And it's a bit similar, I feel, in this situation, that if he comes back and he's full of beans and he then says, "I'm, I love this club, what they've done, the way they've supported me. I'm really looking forward to the long term future here. So are our players. We know we're on a journey. Signs a new contract. That could all happen within a couple of weeks. Probably
mm,
won't, but it could. And I think that, and I personally, I would prefer that scenario. I think,
yeah,
to jettison him after a year and a half, knowing the caliber of manager that he is, and what he would need to prove himself at our club. None of us have fulfilled those promises.
no,
So we should. But having said that, if I don't know if he's unhappy, if he is unhappy, or if he really is unwell beyond what we expected, and it's going to be a number of weeks where he's not going to be available, then I think that we don't have any option but to pull the trigger and get the new man in, because
mm,
it is so destabilizing. Whatever message the club is putting out at the moment is not working, because
mm.
you can see the social media scene anyway, at least, is just is fermenting with this conspiracy that he's just about to go.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, I suppose we've got to have a bit of a weather eye on it and see how well Stellini does in his place. We did appear to play with a little bit more freedom when he was away having the operation, so you never know. That might, if that continues, then that might be a workable situation until such time as he's back, and who knows how that might play out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was minded during that week or so of how suddenly things improved when George Graham's rheumatoid arthritis stopped him from taking training anymore, and suddenly Spurs in that
Yeah,
season as well.
yeah.
Um, so like you say, I mean, the point we keep going back to is we just don't know, do we? I mean,
Mm,
my problem with it all is were it anybody else, I would not be hesitating to say, get fucking rid of him and get Pochettino
mm,
in. If
yeah,
it was literally anybody else, I'd be saying that. The
yeah.
only reason that I'm a little bit equivocal on it is that I do believe that, like you say, he is this sort of world class manager, and not only does he have the ability to do more than he has been doing, he also has that clout. I mean, he's spoken about the difficulty of getting transfer targets to sign for Tottenham.
Yeah, yeah.
He spoke about that in the summer, about we can identify the players, but persuading them to come is a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
I believe is because we still have one of the lowest wage structures in the league, because ultimately that's their motivating factor for come to a club.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe this not having won anything for a decade or more is anything to do with it, because I think all footballers will be like any other driven sports person or professional and think that they are going to be the difference in between the
Mm-hmm.
winning and losing. I think it comes down to money.
Yeah, I do.
Um, so, the thing is, if we jettison a name like Conte, we do take away one of our levers of getting bigger name players in.
Mm-hmm. That said,
They haven't come yet.
no. That said, I think possibly because of the uncertainty of whether he will be around. So, like for example, we're trying to, rumors are we're still sniffing around Bastoni, and he hasn't signed a new contract. But would Bastoni come if Conte's gone in the summer? I wouldn't think so. Would you?
No.
I mean, if Pochettino came in, as good as we all think he is, but most other people around the world and other players do not see him on the same level as Conte.
No, well, this is precisely the point, isn't it? I
Mm,
mean, we love him. I love him. I want him back. I want
yeah.
Pochettino to come back to Spurs. Like, but it alters that whole thing, doesn't it? We have to then go back into this project mode, this complete project mode where we're
Mm,
coaching our own players. I mean, it might be better for players that we have bought, like Jed Spence and some of the other players that have come in with ability that haven't been given a chance. But we might well see, the Danny Rose-like transformation in their performances, and they're going to push us on. But that only ever got us close. It never got us over the line.
No, no. But we do have a lot better players now than we did then. Okay, yeah, we did. You look at, we had probably the best wing back situation.
Well, we had the best back. We had the best back four in the league for about 3 years. We conceded the least amount of goals for anybody that didn't win the fucking league ever or something.
Yeah.
So
Typical.
I mean that's the thing that really needs addressing, doesn't it? We've traded Toby Alderweireld for Eric Dyer.
Yeah, we desperately need two centre backs because but we've been saying this for ages. Everybody knows it. The club must know it. But we're no closer. We seem to be buying anyone but centre backs at the moment.
I guess the thing is, a really good centre back probably is a little bit like a really good goalkeeper in that they probably up all that often, and when they do, they're going to be out of our price bracket. Perhaps you look at Virgil van Dijk when he went to Liverpool. They spent 75 million quid on him just to get it over the line. Can you see us something similar with a centre back?
No, and literally, you have to. If you want someone like Cavadio, who's 21 and one of the best prospects in the world, you have to pay 80, 90, 100 million. And and if we're saying already we can't compete with that, then we're looking just to be smarter than the market. So I think this is where I think I suppose it adds fuel to the fire that Conte won't be around, because he's not your project manager. Who has he improved? Can you say maybe Hobbier? But he hasn't really improved any players, has he?
Well, no. I mean, I think Højbjerg's been pretty consistent. I mean, he's done the job that he's done all the way throughout, hasn't he? I mean, he did the same job with Mourinho, and he's good at what he's good at. And at times he has sort of flashes of brilliance, but a lot of the rest of the time it seems to be a bit patchy. I don't really put a finger on anybody he's improved. I mean, Son played with an amazing amount of freedom at the end of last season, but that appears to have vanished into the mist, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that really is an epic drop off, isn't it? I love Sonny, and I'm of the mind to stick with him, but we are in a situation where a tough decision needs to be made now, just because it's fairer on the whole squad, because his form is so awful.
And we've got Richarlison sat there kicking his heel.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I said it before. I would have loved to have seen them play Kane in a 10 with Richarlison centre front alongside Son and Kulusevski. Kane does an awful lot of that work in that 10 space anyway. And the reason we're not really getting an awful lot in the way of return for our pressure when we apply it is because he's not in the box. He's out of the box because he's had to drop deep to get the ball, and the Harry Kane shaped hole somewhere around the penalty area, and Son isn't able to come in and fulfill that role, whereas Richarlison might be able to. This is perhaps goes back to that Conte being wedded to this system and this formation that he is that it's too inflexible perhaps. I mean, there might be other reasons. Perhaps they've talked about it and Kane's gone, I don't fancy that much. And so that's the end of it. But we don't know. I mean, from the outside, it's a very difficult thing to try and plumb the depths of, isn't it? But
yeah, no, I think you're right, though. I think that what your suggestion is there, I think sounds the best solution. I think that would be quite exciting. When he came on the other day against AC Milan, I thought he looked really lively. I think he's more than ready. What would it be buying for if we're not going to start using him? If he's just going to have 10 minutes here and there.
Bought him because Son's leaving.
Yeah, maybe.
I wonder if that's it. I wonder if this is the last season that we get out of Son, and they bought him with that in mind, knowing that he have a year to bed in. I mean, they took him from Everton, who was struggling, and it was a perfect time to make the signing. Son's been at the club for 8 years now, something like that. He's really reaching the end of his time at a club, and so it wouldn't be at all surprising if this was actually a long-term replacement strategy, and that would explain why he's not getting the time yet, why we're not using him. I've seen them put him outright and bring Kulusevski back or take Kulusevski off. And he seems to be more effective when he comes in away from that role. So I don't, I don't see that as being the strategy for where we're going to play him long term. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we are just sort of shooting the breeze now, aren't we?
Yeah. Should
We
we
have
look
no
ahead
idea.
to the must-win game? I feel it is a must-win game against Manchester, against the West Ham.
Yeah.
Feels that way, doesn't it, already?
Yeah, and it's dangerous because they're coming into it in some really patchy form, and they always turn up when they play us.
Yeah.
We need the win, don't we? I mean,
Yeah.
our form is bad, and our play is bad, and tails are down, and supporters are. I mean, the away support is always wonderful. I mean, when we were at Fulham the other week, that's all you could hear. But there is unrest in the fan base. Especially at home. It's we're going to have to do it. We're going to do it.
I think so. I mean, obviously we're very close to the Champions League spot. Newcastle got Liverpool, so there's possibly an opportunity for us to leapfrog them. But also just mood-wise around the club, if we lost that one, I think it would be really, really not good at all.
Well, the teams above us are all trading points at the moment, aren't they? Now wobble. Manchester City are continually patchy. Manchester United seem to be going from strength to strength. But they're all trading points off each other. And if we continue to drop points at this time, we will be out of touch before it's and it'll be late. So
it's not looking positive.
We really, really, really had the Leicester game last week was an absolute fucking disaster. And hopefully that will be the nadir that it all to do is pin that result on the wall and say,
this is good.
If you don't do it, if you don't apply yourselves, this will happen again.
Yeah.
And Harry, it's no good you talking about the club showing ambition. It's no good you saying we need to go again. It's no good all of us saying, well, we have to do better in after match interviews. Fucking do it when it matters,
Yeah. So that said, what do you reckon a score will be, Rich?
2-1 to us.
Yeah, I think it'll be a pretty edgy, horrible game, as it always is. Lots of a few yellow cards, I would imagine. I'm gonna go 3-1 to us.
Yeah. Be nice. It'd be nice.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up, mate. We've probably exhausted all we can say about Conte's situation without going round and round in so many circles. And Coys.
Come on, you Spurs.